Hello, I'm Richard Claywell. This is Litigation Speaks. We're going to have another episode today, and today we're going to talk about the market approach and how you go out and select the transactions you want to use to get a pricing multiple. The first thing that you should do is to go out and do a, quote, unrestricted search of the databases that you're going to use. The unrestricted search says I want to look at all the transactions under the SIC or the NAICS code. So by doing the unrestricted search, and this should be in the report telling you that this is what we did, tells you we've looked at everything, that we're not going out and trying to pick the highest or the lowest numbers. We're not cherry picking any place. So we want to look at everything that's out there. So that should be in the report. If you don't see something like this in your reports provided by your valuation experts, whether it's a plaintiff or defense, you have, in my opinion, a problem because you don't know if they've cherry picked to get an answer that they're really looking for or not. When we start the search for these transactions, we're either going to use called a NAICS code or an SIC code. One is a North American Industry Classification System, and the other is a Standard Industrial Classification Code. So these are codes where these companies are pigeonholed into a specific place, and then you can go out and find other companies that do similar things, and now you've got some history of what's really going on with this. When we do that, we want to do our search for information that's known or knowable as of the valuation date. And we've talked about this before, but there's a U.S. Supreme Court case, it's Ithaca Trust versus Commissioner, that deals specifically with business valuations, that says that you cannot use information that was not known or knowable as of the valuation date. And if you stop and think about that, if you have a hypothetical buyer and seller, and the sale is going to be consummated, do they know what's going to happen tomorrow? Do they know what's going to happen next week, next month, next year? Probably not. So therefore, that future information is not known or knowable. So we have to have a cutoff time, and that's going to be the valuation date. When we download the transactions, we have a lot of information that's there, and a lot of transactions typically. The problem is, can we use all of them? And the answer typically is no. So what we want to do is eliminate transactions that we have accidentally downloaded that are beyond the valuation date, because that information is not known or knowable. We want to remove transactions that don't have any revenues, because when we use these pricing multiples, we're looking for a price to sales or a price to earnings multiple. So if we don't have the revenues, we're not going to get there. If we don't have the earnings or the sales price, we're not going to get there. So we have to eliminate those types of transactions. If we have a company that has losses, I eliminate the losses. The reason for that is I'm not in a business to make losses. So there's a mindset to management if we can continually have losses that are out there. So I suggest that you remove those. We also want to look for companies that are too large or too small. And we had a previous presentation on how you actually go out there and do that. So those need to be eliminated so we can get the right pooling of the data that we're looking for. We also want to look for duplicate transactions, and we want to look for transactions that are not in the same type of industry that we're in. What happens is that these companies are grouped together by the NAICS and SIC codes, but that doesn't mean you do the same thing. There's a lot of variety in there, so we need to look at what's actually being done and eliminate transactions that don't seem to be comparable. Depending on the database that you use, you're going to get different types of information. One of the things that I always eliminate are countries not in the U.S. I've talked to some friends of mine in Canada. Their tax structure is completely different than the tax structure in the U.S. I remember helping some people in China value a company years and years and years ago, but the way they tax is a little bit different also. So if you're in a foreign country, that database is downloaded, you need to get rid of that. You also want to look at the data that you download. Do you have an outlier? And the standard to use for that is 2.5 standard deviations. So if you have a bell curve and you're on the far end of the left or far end of the right, and that exceeds 2.5 standard deviations, which means it's way out there, then that's going to be an outlier, and you want to exclude those because it's probably not a fair market value transaction. So we need to eliminate those transactions. I've actually written an article that's been published on how you go through that particular process. So you may want to take a look at that, but you need to see if your expert has excluded those types of transactions that are out there. So what winds up happening is if we go out and we do all of this, we have a cleansed data set that we can use potentially as a source of data for valuing companies using a market approach. This helps us eliminate damaging information, because if we include information that should not be there, you may find out about this in a deposition, because I can download the same data that your expert's using, and I've actually done that sort of thing, and tell you that the information is not correct because they didn't do some of these types of things. Another thing we want to look for talking about the outliers is the data symmetrical? Is there symmetry in the data? Which means if you look at a bell curve, you have almost an equal weight on the left or right hand side of a bell curve. That way you don't have skewed data that's going to give you an arbitrarily low number or an arbitrarily high number. If you don't go through this process, this is generally accepted within the business valuation community. If you don't go through this process and eliminate these types of transactions, then your data is going to be flawed, and it does not represent the reliable application and the principal methods and the principal methods for doing a business valuation. So you run the risk, if you don't do this correctly, of having somebody attack you for that. Okay, if you have any questions about this, send me an email. If you want to, give me a call. If you have any questions on anything related to business valuations, how you do that, the good, bad, or ugly with an approach or methodologies that are out there, give me a call or send me an email. We can talk about how that works. Have a great day. We'll be doing another one of these things in a couple of weeks. Talk to you later. Bye.